My LG G5 versus the Samsung S95F livestream last week was the most intense comparison of flagship OLED TVs yet in 2025 because, well, 7 hours live streaming is always intense. But for those of you who don't want to sit through 7 hours or even the 2-hour wrap-up session the following day, today we have an 8-minute summary highlighting what I liked about each TV and what personally I would choose to set the stage for yet a third challenger. Yes, the Bravia II is coming next week for yet another intense live stream. But let's set the table, summarizing the strengths and weaknesses of the LG G5 and the Samsung S95F before talking about round 2 next week. First, a question for you. What kind of HDMI cable do you have? When do you need good optical cables and when is a copper cable just fine? Well, let me tell you. When your cable's over 8 feet long, keep in mind that the longer the cable, the more power they draw from your TV, adding heat to your HDMI input. Not great for your TV's longevity. And the optical cable I have here has removable HDMI heads. So you can upgrade to HDMI 2.2, I know, not yet, but when you are ready. Thanks to RuiPro for sponsoring this video. This is a product I know very well because I've been using RuiPro optical cables since 2019 when I started this channel. And this is their latest beast, the Gen 4 AK 8K cable. I've completely switched over to optical for all my TV reviews. No signal dropouts, just clean performance. You can check out the cables in my links in the video description below. Go optical, go RuiPro. Beginning with my favorite criteria for any TV review, and that is HDR Impact, and the verdict is clear. The LG G5 versus Samsung S95F versus LG G4 versus S95D, right? These are the top TVs last year and this year. The G5 head and shoulders above the competition when the content demands it. So we're not talking artificially making things brighter, but rather if the content isn't that bright, well, all the TVs look the same because they can easily do content that's not that bright. But when you have bright content like Jennifer Gala's bright content, 4,000 nits or higher, and the TVs are pushed beyond their ability to accurately show 4,000 nits, which TV gives you that impact? The G5. It has taken over from the G4. Yes, the G4 was awesome with MLA. This primary RGB OLED, primary RGB tandem OLED, is the truth. It hits it hard. Now the S95F is noticeably slightly brighter than the S95D, but that was not enough. The G5 nails it in filmmaker mode when brightness is called for. Now, here's what's interesting. The Samsung S95D, instead of hitting that brightness, it pulled back the brightness a little bit to give you all the color saturation that that scene potentially could have. And so here's the thing that we've noticed. When the brightness is beyond the capability of the TV, either the G5 or the S95F, each TV has to make a choice. In this case, do you go with HDR Impact or do you go with color saturation, right? Neither are necessarily accurate to the source because the source wants both HDR Impact and that bit of extra color that's there. So ultimately, you have to choose your poison. Clip some of that color, but hit the brightness. Or preserve all the color, but then lose the brightness. What does the creator want? Well, Jennifer Gallo was there to answer because that was her content. In that scene, the Samsung S95F showed deeper orange with individual raindrops visible, whereas on the G5, the raindrops were gone, but the brightness was greater. And so Jennifer said, impact.
And so the question is, does your creator want you to have HDR Impact or do they want you to see the rain? Jennifer Gallo, you're here. Can you tell us what is it you want? Do you want the impact or the rain? Jennifer answered. She is the creator. She wants impact.
Well, there you have it. In that scene, the G5 made the right choice. It doesn't mean that that's the right choice for you, though. And so I have to be very careful here. It's subjective. Some of you, many of you actually complain that, well, these TVs are getting a bit too bright and you prefer extra color saturation. In that case, get the Samsung S95F because consistently it will err on the side of additional color saturation rather than losing any of that color to get that HDR impact. The G5, on the other hand, it's willing to lose a little color but push brightness hard, going for HDR impact. And for me, I think that's the right choice because, as I said, I love HDR impact, but is that you? Again, no wrong answer here. But let's move on to the next criteria that we tested: maximum sustained brightness for sports. You're in SDR, you're in a bright room, you're watching hockey. You need a TV that could sustain bright white or just bright images in general. Which TV did the trick? It was the G5. Now the G4 got bright, but not as bright. In vivid mode, oh, that G5 was amazing. It easily won, hands down. Now this is not to say the S95F was terrible. Nevertheless, if you want the brightest sports watching OLED TV this year, it is definitely the G5 in vivid mode. Boom, nailed it. Now, this is where things get tricky. So let's move on from brightness into what could be a deal breaker for many of you: this anti-reflective coating, anti-glare coating, this matte coating on the S95F. The G5 doesn't have it. So as a result, in some of the darker scenes, you can see some reflections behind me, right? Very subtle, not distracting to me, but for many of you, it could be. And the S95F, there was no reflection at all. But the cost to be paid is slight loss in contrast, blacks, deep blacks, shadow detail, slightly lifted means it looks like it's brighter than it should be. More importantly, some of you may notice a slight brown color rather than a monochromatic black. There's a slight brown due to the ambient lighting hitting that coating and possibly even the scatter plate of qd-oled. But either way, the S95F, it's a double-edged sword depending on your ambient lighting environment. So for those of you who complain, oh my gosh, I have so many lights behind me, I can see my reflection on the TV, that's very annoying in the dark scenes, I'd rather not have that. Look at the S95F. Next up was probably the most exciting: gaming performance in terms of image quality. Here's the exciting part: the LG G5 finally steps up, unleashes SDR. You can now get it as bright as the S95F. Never happened before in prior generations. G4 didn't do it, G3 didn't do it, G5 does it. Its brightness is unleashed in SDR. And so, how amazing is that for potential G5 owners? You are there. I loved the G5 for gaming. That's not to say the S95F wasn't great. It's HGIG mode, so that's setting the advanced game settings to basic and your HDR tone mapping to static, and boom, you're in an HGIG mode that looked really similar to the G5. I don't think there was a big difference. I think they both work very well. So for those of you staying away from the S95F thinking maybe HGIG isn't accurate enough due to prior generations, I think they nailed it this generation. Now, in some scenes, the G5 did have a slight edge in HDR impact. Only some scenes. More often than not, they're indistinguishable. Keep that in mind. More often than not, it's a wash on these two TVs. So I say choose the TV where you have a preference for the UI, maybe the features, maybe you want to play it safe and get the G5 because of its full 48 gigabit bandwidth versus the S95F with a One Connect box who might be capped at 40 gigabits per second, and that may affect your gaming performance. It may. We didn't see an issue on PlayStation Pro, PS5 Pro, but when you're PC gaming, that could potentially be an issue, so it's something to keep in mind. Now, before we get to the Sony Bravia 8II and what it will bring to the table, a quick firmware update specific to the G5. It appears to have addressed that near black shadow detail issue that many complained of at the beginning of the review season in the UK. So I hope that rolls out to the G5 that we have here in the USA at Valley Electronics. That should even the playing field, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore. But now, let's talk about the Bravia 8II. What does it bring to the table? First, you know the strengths and weaknesses of the G5 and the Samsung S95F now, right? S95F pulling back on that brightness just a touch to give you color saturation. G5 pushing that brightness a touch to get you HDR impact. What will the Bravia 8II do? Split the difference right in the middle, or err even harder to beat the G5 in HDR impact just like its Bravia 9 flagship mini LED. Don't miss this live stream that answers all these questions and more. April 27, Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Bring your questions, hopes, and dreams, and until next time, start the FOMO.